Dear friends, very happy to be here, very honored to be asked. Like all of you, on election night, I couldn't believe my eyes when they announced that the Conservatives had lost their overall majority. And that was a triumph, that was a victory, because for weeks before that, they had been telling us Tory majority would be 100, at least 80, 60, 50, at least she'd keep her present majority. That was untouchable, and then suddenly things began to go wrong. And as the campaign continued, it became clear that this campaign, waged by the Corbyn-McDonnell leadership of the Labour Party, was the most radical campaign many young people in this country had ever seen since the time of Margaret Thatcher. The manifesto, remarkable. The first time since Thatcherism and Blairism that a group of political leaders supported by their party base, membership in rank and file, and many in the trade unions had declared in public, in the manifesto, we are going to turn neoliberalism back. We are going to take the railways back into public ownership. And we will think about other utilities later. Unheard of. Unheard of because the entire political culture of this country had been taken over by neoliberal ideas, neoliberal hegemony. It was not considered sane to question this. People, when you used to question it, a handful of us have been doing so for most of our lives, certainly the last 40 years, when they would say, you're mad, you're dinosaurs, you're crazy, you should be in a museum. Well, who should be in a museum now? Who should be put in the Museum of Antiquities, bringing out these ancient ideas of how capitalism should function, how profits were the key, how the poor didn't matter? These are ideas going back to the early years of capitalism, to the 19th century, which they presented as reforms, which they presented as innovations, which they presented as advances, but which actually took the culture, the political culture, the social and economic culture of every country where they were tried, it took that culture backwards. Now, in Britain, not in other European countries as yet, and Bernie Sanders tried his best in the States but was sabotaged, but in Britain, thanks to you, really, I mean, Jeremy, John, others did their bit, and Jeremy's energy was remarkable. Not just his energy, but the fact that he had a backbone made of granite. Because no other Labour Party leader has been vilified like this in the media. And not just the conservative media. The liberal media. Till the election campaign, The Guardian ran a disgusting, dishonest campaign against Corbyn and McDonnell. Television we don't expect too much from. How could we, with lovely Laura? We don't expect too much from them. But some newspapers really went down into the gutter, and they and their columnists should be ashamed. It's fine now saying, oh, we got it wrong. You know, they're only saying that because of the large vote the Labour Party won, not because they've changed particularly. But that vote, one of the largest popular votes in Labour Party history, let us never forget, was got under a left-wing leadership of this party. I remember reading reports and hearing things from other sources that when the Parliamentary Labour Party called Jeremy in for a vote of no confidence, some of the language they used, some of the psychological warfare they waged, the slanders they hurled at his head and then rushed and told their media friends afterwards were amongst the most disgusting to be seen even inside the Parliamentary Labour Party against any left-wing leader. And for the party to move forward, this has to stop, because had they not done this for 2 years continuously, the new leadership could have been concentrating on winning the general election. It was having to fight the enemy and the enemy behind your back at the same time that wasted a lot of time. So I hope some of these people will have learned the lesson. Second point I want to make is on Brexit, which divided both the left and the right. Look, had Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell decided to join David Cameron's campaign for remaining, which was a Tory-led campaign, and stood side by side with him, I don't think Labour would have won its large majorities. I promise you that. They waged an independent campaign. They made criticisms of the EU, which didn't go far enough in my view, but which were important. And I'll tell you why. The British people have voted now to quit the European Union. Rightly or wrongly, it is their decision. This decision must be carried through in the best way possible. That doesn't harm the majority of the British people. I don't care a damn about the hedge fund owners. I really don't. And the notion that the wealth should be based on them and the poor suffer as long as they make money, it doesn't make sense anymore. But if Britain was still in the EU, one thing we should bear in mind, that a large chunk of the manifesto would not be permitted by EU rules and regulations. Taking back the utilities would not be permitted. So it's worth bearing this in mind. The right have their own hostility to the EU, which is based on racism and xenophobia. But there is a strong left critique to be made. And a few of us tried to make it, but it wasn't made. And the British people, despite the fact that on paper all three major parties of this country asked them to vote Remain, voted Brexit. Why? Had they all suddenly got racist? Had they been infected by some horrible disease? No. For most people who did this, it was a scream, rage against neoliberalism, which they identified with the European Union. One of the most important things, apart from the manifesto, and of course the energy of Jeremy in traipsing the country and drawing out the masses, a campaign we haven't seen for a very, very long time in this country, was the response to the appalling terrorist attacks in Manchester and London. Now, of course, everyone mouths inanities at the time. People look for things to say. And I'm very pleased, I have to say this in public, that Jeremy, while attacking the attacks, naturally, they've never been part in policy of any left-wing group. No one on the left supports terrorism. Denouncing also the shortage of policemen to protect people on the streets, also correct. Went on to, and attacking the shortage of firemen, by the way, also extremely important. Went on to say that however appalling and awful these attacks, the reason, that doesn't mean we justify them, but the reason for these attacks were the foreign policy of the United States and this country following it blindly. And they thought he'd be wiped out. Oh, what a mistake, the pundits were saying in the newspapers. Theresa May announced, now we're going to finish him off. because he doesn't know how to defend Britain. What happened then to this campaign? It didn't take off. Why? Because within 48 hours, opinion polls were revealing that 2/3 of the population agreed with Corbyn. And this means that sometimes it's important to take what appear to be risks and trust the judgment of the people you're trying to win over to your politics. That becomes extremely important. Then they began the third thing. Would you press the nuclear button? And, right-wing Labour people saying, I would press the nuclear button. Theresa May was saying she would have no hesitation in pressing the nuclear button. In the end, the only button she had to press was to sack her 2 advisors over the weekend. But the real point is this, that no British politician can press the nuclear button. Just accept that. Everyone in the British establishment, military, defense, political establishment knows this. The only person who can give a British politician authority to press the nuclear button is the United States of America. This is codified in secret protocols, not so secret at that. No one can use nuclear weapons in the Western Alliance without the permission of the United States. So this was a complete farce as well. Now, I can't go on much longer, but just to say this, the campaign that was waged was absolutely brilliant. And for those of us who helped in little ways we could, we have to but say it, admire the tenacity of the leaders of this new style Labour leadership, which rests on mass basis, on mass campaigns, who voted Corbyn in twice as leader of the Labour Party, who refused to believe a word the press said, and the swathes of young people who joined the campaign on the social networks, making sure that their friends and them came out to vote, to the activity, the activism of Momentum, an organization which went canvassing in its own way, using new methods to canvass. I think that whenever the next election happens, and it could happen within a year, it could happen within 2 years, we don't know when, because the Tories, unlike Labour, are not a very sentimental lot. They can get rid of Theresa May. Actually, Labour, I have to say, has been very unsentimental about Jeremy, the Parliamentary Labour Party. But in general, the Tories are more ruthless. They dump you very quickly. So if they decide to change a leader, the leader has to be elected by the Tory party base, who are roughly my age, average, which is, in their early 70s. There are very few young people there, and they will go for some sort of creepy successor, someone who you don't believe exists till she becomes a Tory candidate like Andrea Leadsom. But these people are there, they're around. And against them, we have to wage the most amazing mass campaign, build a mass campaign on big issues everywhere. And in Scotland, too, things are changing. To my surprise, I never thought this would be the case. But the fact here, too, is that Nicola Sturgeon simply thought that using the EU, we're in the EU, they are not, we're going to separate, didn't work in Scotland either. People were nervous about that. Nor did it work for the Liberal Democrats, who thought on this rage amongst young people on the way in which the Brexit campaign was conducted would give the Lib Dems a huge majority. Well, it didn't. That's why their leader had to resign. The other reasons were supplementaries. This was the main reason. They failed to build the Labour Party. So there is everything left to go forward on this manifesto, to build a mass campaign, and to put Corbyn in number 10 and McDonnell in number 11 at the first possible opportunity.